See, what we were really excited to hear about was the Great Peacemaker, because no matter what, the Great Peacemaker keeps interweaving into the walk. Of course, from the light and other things that have happened along the way. And I'm not sure we have the complete story of the Great Peacemaker.
Well, I can tell you what I know and what I've been taught so far, because the Longhouse has always been a part of me, but I haven't really fully immersed myself into it until about 3 years ago. And so I told you we were working on the story that we're translating in Oneida. And basically the Peacemaker was born from the Huron tribe. And the Huron was, they were big enemies to the Confederacy. And the Confederacy consists of the 6 nations, the Oneida, the Mohawk, the Tuscarora, the Seneca, and the Onondaga. And he was born into the Huron, and first of all, his grandmother had moved her daughter and herself out of the tribe because of all the wars that were going on within the Confederacy and the Huron. And so when she found out her daughter was pregnant, and her daughter didn't know who she was pregnant from, she had moved her daughter out to the shores of the reservation, which is now near Tyendinaga, which is a Mohawk community. And so she moved her there because she wanted her to give birth, and then they can go back to the tribe, because she was ashamed that her grandson didn't have a father. And there's 3 things that she tried to do when her daughter gave birth to get rid of her grandson. And one of the first ones she did was she dug a hole in the ice and she pushed him down the river, because she thought her daughter was witched, and that's how she became pregnant. And so when she thought she got rid of him, he was there in his mother's arms when she got back. And it was like nothing had happened, and she couldn't figure it out, and she was afraid for her daughter, and because she had thought some sorcerer or something had done something to her. And so the second thing is that she burned him. She put him in a pile of wood that she made outside of their longhouse, and she burned him. And she waited until everything had turned to ash. And when she came back to their longhouse, he was there back in his mom's arms again. And she couldn't figure it out, and the next thing she was going to do was she was going to chop him up. And that night, before she was going to do that, she had a dream, and one of the messengers had came to her and told her, "We're the ones that created your grandson, and you need to repent for what you've done." So in the Longhouse, we do a ceremony where you do ask the Creator for forgiveness for the things that you've done. And some of the words that we use in that story is what we use in the Longhouse. But he told her how to treat her grandson, and he was going to bring peace to all of the Indian people there, and how her and her daughter needed to treat him, and how the things that they needed to show him. And so as he grew up, there's also a side story about there's 11 other boys that were born on the same day, and they all followed him, and they learned the different ceremonies and songs too. But as he grew up, he would play a lot by himself, and it wasn't really by himself because he was learning all of the things that he needed to share with people. And so when the time came for him to leave, he told his mother and his grandmother that there was a birch tree right outside their longhouse, and they ended up staying there. They didn't go back to the tribe. And he said, "When you want to know how I'm doing, cut a knot into this tree. And if there's sap running, that means I'm still alive. If there's blood, then you know that something's happened to me and I'm not coming back." And so what he had done was he made a canoe, and he made it out of white stone. And there's a lot of things that have been said about how he traveled, because his oar was also stone. Recently I heard in Onondaga, a man by the name of Tom Porter was explaining some of this to us, and some of the ancestors said that he had sang a song, and that's how he paddled his boat, and that the oar was just for the people to see when he came to shore, because he didn't want them to be afraid of him. And there's certain songs that he sang to make it go, and some people said that his boat didn't even touch the water. And so some people actually know those songs, and I think there's only one person that knows them now within the Confederacy. But in that area, there now, today, if you go to Tyendinaga, they say if you can learn that song, you can see the water where the ripples were, and you can follow the ripples, and it'll show you where all the places that he stopped at. And so the first place that he stopped was to the Mohawks because they were closer to the Huron. And one of the first people that he had run into was Ilax, which is he eats people, which is a cannibal. And this cannibal had so much power that if he was away from his lodge, he knew when people were there, and he knew where they were and who they were. And when the peacemaker came there, he seen the cannibal bring somebody into his lodge, and he knew that he would have to try to help him, and he'd be the first person he'd bring peace to. And so the story is that the peacemaker climbed on top of his lodge and looked into his smoke hole, and he seen the peacemaker's reflection in the water, and he thought it was his. And the thing about it is that you can see the power when they talk about it is because the cannibal didn't know that the peacemaker was there. He had no idea that he was there, and that's why he thought that that was his reflection. And he couldn't believe how handsome a person could do this to people. And so it kind of started from just seeing that, is put that thought into his head. And so he was boiling his water and it wouldn't boil. And he kept boiling it, trying to boil it, and it wouldn't boil. And he kept seeing the reflection. And so finally the peacemaker came down, and he said that he wanted to talk to the cannibal. And the cannibal was just amazed because he didn't even know that he was there. He couldn't see him coming. And so he invited him into his lodge. And that's the first person that the peacemaker talked about peace, power, and righteousness to. And so he spent time with the cannibal, and he told them that one day you're going to lead your people and you're going to help your people. And so they believe that that's one of the first chiefs that we had within the Confederacy. And so the second person that he the second person was the woman, and she lived in between the tribes that were fighting. And there's a different variation to the story. One is where she helped the warriors, and she was never on one side or the other. Okay. And she helped them, and she fed them, and let them stay there. Another part is, another version is that she did all that, but she poisoned them, and she killed them. And it didn't matter which side they were on, she killed anybody that came there. And so the peacemaker had heard about her, and he found where she lived. And she also had the same power as the cannibal. She knew when someone was there. And he had spread his word to her and told her that you can help your people with the things that you know and how powerful you are. You can help your people and all people, and you can spread this message of peace, power, and righteousness. And she was the first clan mother that we had in our Confederacy. And so there's different parts of the peacemaker story. One was with the Hiawatha, with Chief Hiawatha and his daughters. And that form, when his daughters passed away, he had 7 daughters that passed away. And the peacemaker was the one that helped him with the mournings of his daughters. And so that's where we have our condolence ceremony that we have. So a lot of the protocol that we have in the Longhouse comes from the peacemaker and the people that he had met. And that's how we formed our chiefs and our clan mothers and our faith keepers. So those are the two main ones that I want to stress, because that was our first chief and that was our first clan mother. And one of the chiefs that is now the Taradaho, they believe that he was a cannibal also, and that he was one of the last people that the peacemaker was trying to talk peace into, because the other chiefs couldn't do it. And he had so much power that if he looked at an animal, he could kill it just by looking at it. And he would do that so that all the warriors would stay away from him. And the chiefs tried to talk him into helping them and not being that way, and they couldn't. So the peacemaker came to him and sat down and talked to him. But they said when he talked to him that snakes came out of his hair, and he had he kind of looked how the left-handed twin.
Okay.
They describe him as being looking like that, and so when he talked him into bringing peace and stuff like that, all of that faded away, and he became the Taradaho, which is the main chief's title that we have in the Confederacy, and it's held by an Onondaga man that all of the clan mothers in the Confederacy kind of coordinate on who is going to be that person. And so that was the forming of our chiefs and our clan mothers from the Peacemaker. He started a lot of the protocol for how clan mothers are put up and how names are done, and how our wampum and our fires are spread out. So he contributed a lot to what we have.
And you talk about the wampum, because people listening may not know what that is. Could you describe
the wampum isn't used as money. It isn't used, as anything other than to tell a story and to have a treaty. We have a lot of different wampum belts. And so when we make the wampum belt, it's a treaty, it's a story. And so we're telling a story about different things. There's the 2-row wampum belt. I think that's a very important one because it talks about the non-native and the native people. And there's it'll be all white, and then there'll be 2 rows of purple wampum beads. And what they represent is the non-native people and the native people, and how we're supposed to work together side by side, but we stay in our own boats. And we go along our own path, but we work together in peace. And that was one of the wampum belts that I thought was most important now, even in relation to today. We also have a Hiawatha belt that connects all 6 of our nations. You'll see 5 fires though on there because the original was 5 nations,
right?
And the Tuscarora joined in the 1700s.
Okay. So when did this begin? What year?
The Peacemaker, they believe, happened thousands of years ago.
Thousands of years. Okay, that's right.
Yeah. We also have another prophet that kind of showed the same things. He was a Seneca from the Seneca tribe in New York, and this was about in the 1700s. He had came along, and the 4 messengers had relayed some more of the message to him, and how we're supposed to treat people, and how marriage is how you're supposed to be with children, and the things that were to come. This was in the 1700s, and they talked about cars and airplanes.
Wow.
And even things that would happen within people, and how, even today, like in vitro, they talk about that in this prophecy. And so we're seeing a lot of it happen today, and it's been told now for 210 years. There's only 4 men in our Confederacy that can recite it right now, but there are more learning. But that's just another prophet that we had to kind of back up the Peacemaker and the message that he had, because they had showed him the same thing and spread the same thing into today's world.
I heard it takes days to recite it. Is that
the Peacemaker story, it takes 12 days. And originally we were supposed to have it, every community was supposed to have it recited every 2 to 5 years. There is only maybe 2 people that can recite it today, and so not everybody gets to hear it. I think the last person to recite it through 12 days was Jacob Swap, and Jake Thomas too. I think he did it. I think he did it before Mr. Swamp did, but they were the last ones that recited it through the 12 days, and so we're trying to get that back too within the Confederacy. There's some people that are trying to learn it, and it's not in every language. It's not in every language, so they have to learn the other languages of the Confederacy to be able to recite it. The Galiweo, which is the other prophet, that takes 4 days, and there's only 4 men that can recite that.
So in your language, the preservation of language and really building the language back up, is it your hope as a people that, as part of the Iroquois Federation, that there'll be someone that then can do that, or is that something that you're born into to do? No,
there's a lot of second language speakers that are learning to recite it. There's a man in 6 Nations that knows all 5 languages, and he's the main one that can recite the prophets. But there's another man in Aguasasne that was, he's a first language speaker, and he was born into the Langhos, and he's another one that recites it. But you don't have to be born into it. I think it's just a hope that we have as a confederacy, to kind of nurture that, and encourage that being taught, and having people learn to do it, because not a lot of people have taken on that challenge. And so I think that's a big part in us regaining our languages, because we're losing our languages so fast. And the percentage rate is unbelievable. Some are less than 1% within the Confederacy alone. And the Mohawks have a lot of people that can speak, and they're the biggest one. You know, like I said, we only have one first language speaker, and she's going to be 101 in June. And you know, the 2 second language speakers.
How is a person born into a longhouse?
Well, when I say born into the longhouse, it was passed on from his parents, raised him to know the ceremonies. They raised him to know what needs to be said for the different ceremonies, and he's a first language speaker.
What do you feel the gift of the great peacemaker is to this time that we're in for all people?
I think the gift is that he gave us so many ways to be good to each other. He gave us so many things to look at and to think about as people. I think that if you take a lot of his teachings, anybody, it doesn't matter who it is, can look at it, and it's a basic human nature. It's basic human qualities that we all have inside of us. And I think the great thing about it is that it's just one person telling us, but it's like a reminder, and it's a reminder to everybody that how we need to treat each other as people. And it doesn't just apply to any one person. That's the great thing about it, is that there's people in Japan that know about the peacemaker. There's people that have called the Confederacy to talk about the peacemaker in Egypt after what had happened to their country. And so it's a universal thing. And I think that's the greatest part, is that it doesn't need any translation. You know, that human nature and compassion and all of that, it doesn't need a translation. Yeah, well, thank you.
Jessica, that was so beautiful.